So I'm just going to fill you in quickly on the bits that I didn't record so this makes sense. Since the middle of last year, I have been working through a few things. After 3.5 years of not taking any medication for bipolar, I found myself in a very depressed place again, which for me was really difficult because I really felt like I had gone all the way back to where I was at the beginning. I've now learned that's not the case, that this road of recovery and mental health is a bit of a dance, and that's okay. So I found myself quite down, quite low, very anxious, and with suicidal thoughts on my mind a lot of the time. Now that hasn't happened to me for a very, very long time. So it took a little while for me to realise that I was in that space again, because the first time that I felt like that, I felt very, very frightened. So go back 10 years, I can remember feeling petrified because I didn't know what was happening to me, because I didn't know what to do or how to make it stop. I just didn't know anything. I hadn't been diagnosed and it was all a bit scary. So fast forward to the middle of last year, and I was getting lower and lower and losing interest in doing things again, hibernating away for days and days, having panic attacks again, and having thoughts, and they were just thoughts and visions of being suicidal again. My visions at the time were of me throwing myself off of my balcony, and this vision was coming to me often, every day, and it was quite intense. So it took me a little while to recognise how severe that feeling was, even though I've been there before, in a slightly different way. The first time I was like that, I was frightened and desperate for help and very frightened by my thoughts. This time around, it was a bit different because I wasn't frightened by my thoughts, because I was telling myself, don't worry, you've been here before, you've had suicidal feelings before, and eventually it got better and it passed and you were okay. So I didn't speak about it that much. I kept it to myself for a number of months, and then eventually I started talking about it to a few close people and saying that actually I wasn't okay. And I went to see a psychiatrist, and we had the conversation. I took the depression and anxiety test, and I sat in the waiting room because I filled out these forms so many times over the last 10 years, part of my diagnosis, part of getting diagnosed, part of my ongoing treatment, part of my medication reviews. And I sat in the waiting room and I filled out the forms, and I just burst into tears because I couldn't believe I was back there. That's what I thought. Now, looking back on it now, I mean, it's only just, last year, I can now recognise that I wasn't back in as bad a place as I was 10 years ago, but I certainly had taken a bit of a knocking. I had a few big events happen, one after another over a short period of time, and it took its toll on me. And didn't cope I wasn't coping as well as I thought I was. I thought I was okay, but actually I was really struggling. So anyway, went to see the psychiatrist, filled out the forms. I could see what the score was, and it wasn't great. They, I scored very, very high on depression and very, very high on anxiety. And when it asked the question, have you been thinking about suicide, and you tick the box which says every day, it's a bit sobering. So we had the conversation. I'm lucky that I have a good level of awareness about what medication works for me or has worked for me in the past, and what hasn't, and what medications brought me symptoms that I wasn't happy to tolerate as a first try. So I was able to really say what I would like to try and have a bit more autonomy in my care plan, more autonomy than I had the first time around. The first time around, I didn't know what was happening to me, and I just had to take the guidance. I had no idea what I was doing. So I said to him, I know that I do need an antidepressant to get myself out of this deep depression. However, I am aware that I have bipolar, and therefore I need to be taking something to ensure that that doesn't then trigger mania in me, because that's when things get really, really difficult to manage. So we agreed on an antidepressant of the particular family that is better at not triggering mania, and also one of the mood stabilizers at a low dose going up to a medium dose. So I took the prescription and I went home and I took them. And I have to say, it was difficult. It was sad for me to do that. It felt hard. It felt, I hate to say like I'd failed, but it different to how I felt the first time around, because the first time around I felt like I was failing at life and I was failing all of my loved ones and I was a failure. I didn't feel like that, but I felt like I'd failed in my attempt at, managing my bipolar myself. So there was that, but equally I then had to sit there and say to myself, but aren't I lucky that I have the option, that when I've exhausted all of the other options myself, which I've learned over the years how to manage things, how to manage my highs and lows and how to be aware and all of these things, aren't I lucky that actually I have this option on the table? So I took the option on the table and started taking the medication in July, I think so, yeah. So anyway, I just needed to give you that, because the video that's going to come after this is then going to explain what's been happening after that. So the medications, as predicted, worked very well, and my suicidal thoughts quickly dissipated, and I woke up one morning and went in to see Gareth and said to him, guess what? I haven't had that suicidal thought for at least 3 hours. And he looked really shocked and because he didn't realise that I was thinking about it that much. And he said, I cannot believe that you were thinking about it that much, that you've had 3 hours break and that to you feels like a long time to have not thought about it. And the truth is, I didn't realise how much I was thinking about it until I started to feel a bit better and stopped thinking about it, if that makes any sense to anybody. But all I'm trying to say in this is there's no shame in taking help again. There's no shame in taking medication again. It's a blessing. It's a blessing that we have that option on the table when we've exhausted the other options. And it does make you feel a lot better.